Lord, you are amazing. You are beyond what we can ever comprehend, Lord. And that's not to freak us out, Lord. It's a beautiful invitation to explore every moment of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year is an incredible invitation to get to know you and to get to know the beauty of you, Lord. And so we're so thankful for that invitation. I pray, Lord, these next few moments as we step into your word and we look at a little closer who you are, who you present yourself to be, Lord, that we would be captivated, we'd be mesmerized, we would be awestruck with who you are, Father. So we love you, we thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, y'all can grab a seat, and it's like spring break right around the corner, right? That's exciting for some people. You know, there comes a time in life that most of us, if not all of us, are in that doesn't mean anything. Like spring break is a thing of the past. Work continues, whatever else may be going on continues and continues. Well, we're in this series, What Lies Beneath, and what we've been talking about is really, remember, we have our professed theology, things that we claim. So we would sit there and say, I believe these things to be true about God. I believe these things to be true about what it is to walk well with Him. And then we have our practical theology, and this is how we live. And so it may be like, man, I believe that God has my best at heart at all times. I believe that. And then we sit here and we see what we know is sin and rebellion, and we just want it, and so we go after it. And so there's that disconnect between our practical theology and our professed theology, and that gap that we have a lot of times leads to some pretty large frustrations in our lives. And so this series, what we're doing is we're coming in and we're saying, what are some of the lies that get us to be distracted with our practical theology? And so tonight's lie is simply this, that God is like me. And you're like, maybe I don't say that, but a lot of times if we think about it, and we're going to just a little bit, we get into this idea that God is very much like me, which is funny because, we were created in God's image, not He in our image. It's a bit like this. One of the first weddings I did, I thought it'd be really great. Let's snap a picture of it. Got a skinny tie on, and it's just wonderful and amazing. Like looking into the sunlight, I'm looking kind of whatever. But this isn't me. This is my dad. And if I were to stand by looking to the sun, you would sit there and go like, "Oh my goodness, your dad got his looks from you, Todd." Right? Like that would be weird to say that for a multitude of reasons. But it would be strange to say, your dad got his looks from you, Todd. Now, what do we say? Todd, you got your good looks from your dad. He's the one who came before. And so this is kind of how the lie ends up working for us. It's just subtle. We're made in the image of God, therefore God must be like me. And that's not at all true. It's this subtle counterfeit truth. Because the enemy knows that if we have a right view of God, He gives us a right view of ourselves, and that is a great way to live. And instead, He would like for us to have a counterfeit view of who God is. And I was thinking about this. Counterfeit truth gets close. Our counterfeits, they get really close to the real thing, but it wreaks havoc in your life. This morning, I was at the bank picking up some money, and I thought, you know what a wonderful thing to do. Let's practice patience and go inside. And so I got to go inside, and there was a line. And this has never happened, but this morning, literally, the two people in front of me, they're sitting there, and you know what they wanted to know? First lady went up, she goes, I have all of these $2 bills that I just found. I want to know, are they all real? Because there was just a stack of them. And so they went and they checked out and they came back, yes, these are all real $2 bills. I'm like, can I get a $100 bill in its place just to confirm that I can walk out with $100? And they said yes, and so they gave her $100 and out she went. The next guy, he was like, so I got $100 from the ATM machine. It gave me 5 20s, and I went to the convenience store, and the guy would not take my money. He wouldn't take it because he said, this is a fake bill. And he handed it to the lady, and the lady just looked at it, and she's like, no, this is, well, hang on. She gets a marker, holds it to the light. There's a machine with a special light. She puts it on. She's like, this is a real $20 bill. So both the people in front were like, I think I have counterfeit bills. What did they do? They went to where the authority was. They went to the bank. They went to the source. Who will know better than the bank? And it's interesting. My mom worked at a bank for a very long time. And when they would have their counterfeit training, do you know what they would do? They would study real bills. They would never look at, here's different things that are coming up. They would only look and feel and touch real money, because then they would just know this is off. And so today, as we're looking at this lie that a God he's made in my image, God is in my image, that's a counterfeit God. And just as counterfeit money has no value, led to a lot of frustration, aggravation, distance, that, your machine gave me this, and so the relationship was being broken. The same is true when we try to follow a counterfeit God. And a counterfeit God, the Bible calls an idol. And it's interesting, in 1 John chapter 5, verse 21, it says this, the very last thing that he writes in this letter: little children, guard yourselves from idols. You and I, we are to guard ourselves from the idol that God has made in our image. How do we get these errant views? Well, typically, it's because our source is wrong. Typically, it's because we go with our feelings. Typically, it goes with, these are the thoughts that I've heard other people say. Sometimes it's assumptions about, well, this is how the world works, therefore God must work this way. We project that on there. And the funny thing is, all of those things have been attacked, they've been tainted, they've been marked, and they've been distorted by the enemy. Sin has come through and tainted all of that. And remember, this whole series, we cannot forget this slide. We have an enemy, a very real enemy, and we know four things. He's active. 1 Peter 5:8 tells us that he is prowling around like a roaring lion, looking for somebody to devour. He has an aim. It is to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what he desires to do. His approach is through lies. God is just like you. So let's have, whatever you think and feel is right. And then he has authority that here on earth, his viewpoint, all of a sudden, his kingdom can be very tempting, because we've talked about this many times. He sets his kingdom up all about you and your highest pleasure, and right here and now. That's what he's looking at. What makes you feel good right now in this moment. And in God's kingdom, the focus is not on you, it's on him, and the time span is eternity. So it's either me and now or he and always. And those two kingdoms go back and forth. And the enemy has authority to be propagating his agenda all over the place. So what we're going to do here, the plan, and we're going to fly through our plan this evening. Oops, come back here. There we go. 3 stops. We're going to look at indicators. Like, what are some indicators that maybe, just maybe, you have a God who's made in your image as opposed to the real God? What are some indicators of that? And then what's the impact of it? I mean, really, what's so bad? Like, if you're just off, like, what does it really matter? I mean, I'm living my life, right? Like, it's fine. I show up to church, it's good. Give some money, you should be happy. And the third, we're going to look at what are some attributes of God, and do they line up with what we think? So that's our framework. FYI, we literally are going to fly through 1 and 2. And so with this, let's talk about a few indicators. And for that, I would love to... You guys know Jeff Foxworthy? Have you heard of him before? He was made famous by "You Might Be a Redneck If." And he always had these things that were funny. One of my favorites was, if your dad walks you to school because you're in the same grade, you might be a redneck. Like, I just thought that was always just funny. So he has that, but you might have a God made in your image if God agrees with all of your entertainment choices, if there's just no conviction, you watch and do whatever you want to do, you input whatever, you listen to whatever, and there's just no conviction because God absolutely agrees with every entertainment choice, you might have a God who is made in your own image. If God is always for your political party and for your political candidate, it's just possible that maybe God is being made in your image. If God supports your every response to every situation, that you are always the victim, you've never done anything wrong, it's always somebody else's fault, there's a good chance that God is made in your image and not the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. If God agrees and strongly supports your spending habits, where each and every penny, nickel, dime, quarter, dollar goes, if he's in total support of how you spend, it's possible that you might have a God made in your own image. If God views other people's sins as just a little bit worse than yours, he has just a little bit more grace towards you than towards others, it's possible that maybe you have a God made in your own image. If God is always angered by the things that make you angry, it's possible that you might have a God made in your own image. 3 more. If God leads you to only pursue people you find physically attractive and funny, bless you, you might have a God made in your own image. If he hates what you hate, loves what you love, thinks what you think, and honestly, if God hasn't dumbfounded you lately, there's a very high probability that the God that you're following is a God made in your own image. A God in your own image is a counterfeit God. It's what the Bible calls an idol. And A.W. Tozer has something interesting to say. He says, an idol of the mind is as offensive to God as an idol of the hand. And I don't know about you, but that kind of cuts me pretty deeply. An idol of the mind is as offensive to God as an idol of the hand. So a wrong view about who he is as offensive to him as fashioning our own idol that we're going to go and bow down to. No. The impact, I told you we'd fly through this. The impact of this is pretty easy. Like if we have a God who is not really the God of Scripture, we're going to be all off course because we know our purpose in life is to image God. We know that from Genesis 1:27. God created humankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. So our purpose, our design, what we are set up to do is to image God. And life works best when we image who he actually is. But if we have a distorted view over who he is, we have a distorted way of living. Therefore, we have a distorted life, distorted relationships, distorted desires, and it's a hot mess of things. So what is the impact of having a distorted view of who God is? Distortion in every area of our life. And we find ourselves frustrated and exhausted because we're running after a counterfeit God. It's a little bit like this. And I've used this example before, but you remember these? These were the days, right? Color by number. Like, Now, I had just moved to a new state. I'd moved from Iowa to Michigan, and it was like first or second day of first grade for me, which is mid-year. And so I was already nervous and wanting to be cool. And I had a trickster, if you will, or AKA Satan, who lived in my neighborhood and went to my same school and sat next to me. And this is why I say this. So I get the color by number, and you got the little crayons up there, and they're letting you know number 1 is blue, number 2 is red. And so I start following, and oh, this is a cute puppy, and I'm just having the time of my life. The teacher's gonna be so impressed, I'm gonna be the best student here. And this trickster goes, hey, Todd, is it Todd? Yeah. You're doing it wrong. So what are you talking about? It's not that hard, right? It's numbers and colors. He goes, our teacher here, I don't know if you know this, she's a trickster. And so you're supposed to look and see what color is it written in. So it says blue, but it's actually written in black ink. And so you're supposed to, that's how you pass here, is you go with what the color of the ink is. You're supposed to match the colors. And I got really panicky. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've done this all wrong. And so I grabbed my black Crayola, and I just started coloring everything in black. And I got all the way, just almost done. I was like, this just doesn't seem right. Right? It didn't look good anymore because even black Crayola crayon over the rest of it just doesn't. And so I go up, and my dad has always said, you're the sensitive child. I would step on people's toes, and I would say, ow. And so, I'm on the verge of tears as I'm coming up to the teacher because I'm like, I think I've done this wrong. And I'm expecting her just to, waylay into me, but because of a lie. I had the key wrong. I wasn't aiming in the right direction. I had done the entire assignment wrong. I got out of first grade. Whew, it's close. But I knew enough not to listen to the trickster anymore, right? Because he fooled me once, and never again was I going to listen to him. I wasn't going to take his advice because it led to a really wrong place, a bad place to live. And the same is true for us. If we got a wrong aim, we're going to have a wrong walk. We're going to do wrong works. We're going to have wrong results. And most of the time, we're not going to figure it out until way down the road. And we're going to go like, what in the world? How did I get bamboozled? Because we thought our purpose was to image God, correct, but the God we were imaging was made in our own image, incorrect. We were running after an idol all along. So let's move from there, points 1 and 2. Like, this is amazing. Get ready to park on point 3. Let's actually look at the source. Let's go to the bank, if you will, with our money and see if indeed it is counterfeit. If you're not following, that means the money is the God that we're following. Does he actually line up with what Scripture says? And I'm going to let you know as we step into this next section, I told people, I said, this is the greatest night ever because I had the freedom to fail. Like, I'm going to fail. There's no if, and, or buts about it. I will fail you this evening, and here is why. Because, newsflash, God is not like you. He's not like me. He is so other. He's of a whole different line than what we are. He is beyond us. I will fail. I will not be able to sit there and go like, and here is your God. I will not be able to do that, nor will you. And so as we sit here and we're going like, well, why the heck even get started? I just want to encourage us. God is so much larger than what we can comprehend. It's not to be a discouragement. I was talking with the table host. I said, it's a little bit like this, or I think it was like a candy jar, if you will. It's just like this endless candy jar. And if you love sour cherries, like you just like, they're the greatest candy ever. And you sit there and you're like, well, I can never get to the bottom of that candy jar, so I'm never going to eat. That's just kind of foolish, right? But how this jar works is you take your first one, you're like, oh, wow, that's like the best sour candy I've ever had in my life. That was it was great. And then you get to the next layer, and it's even better. And even better, and even better. And this is going to go on all throughout our lives here and beyond. We will continue to explore and understand more and more and more who God is. And so it's not a discouragement. This is this beautiful invitation to step in and understand who is God, to get to know him. And Michael Reeves, in his book, Delighting in the Trinity, he says this. He says, Christianity is not primarily about lifestyle change. Can we just pause there for a second? So many times we kind of think that's what it is. I got to clean up my act. That's what church is all about. I had a youth, had some parents email me not very long ago asking if they could find a young adult who would come and hang out with their youth program, and I started dialoguing with them, and I just asked them point blank. I said, well, what kind of youth program do you run? And then they were like, well, what do you mean? And I said, do you have a youth program that basically says, teach our kids to say no to drugs and alcohol and not have sex, and we're going to call that a success? Or are you interested in having your kids get ignited and passionate and excited about who Jesus Christ is and what he's done for their life? Which are you? And I love their response. They thought about it and they said this. I think we would like to be this. But in all honesty, I think we've been this. We've been all about lifestyle, modification. But to continue, Christianity is not primarily about lifestyle change. It is about knowing God, this beautiful invitation. Knowing God, to know and grow, to enjoy him is what we are saved for. It's incredible. And when we think about the failure of this, a couple of weeks ago, we were coming into this topic, and Rebecca's like, you've got to read this book. You've got to read this book. And so Jen Wilkin writes this book, None Like Him, and it really is a fantastic book. And she asked me if it was the greatest thing ever, and I kind of had to stop for a second. What I really like about this book is it's not as technical as some of the other books that I'm reading, and it's very applicable, and so it's really a cool read. She starts off chapter 1, though, is pretty amazing, just talking about like how infinite he is. she has this line that we are measurable, but God is not. And she starts off with her date of birth. And it was funny. We had a friend of ours, a staff member, he and his wife had a baby yesterday, Amelia Joy, and she weighed in at 7 pounds, 3 ounces, born at 8 p.m. Boom, she's been measured. She's not God. And that's how she starts off her book. And she goes on, she says this. She says, God is infinite, unbound by limits. He defies measurement of any kind. His limitlessness underlies all of his attributes. His power, knowledge, love, and mercy are not merely great, but they are infinitely so, measurelessly so. Big words, hard for me. No one can place any aspect of who God is on a scale or against a yardstick. She's trying to get us into this place that God is bigger than we can comprehend, and it makes a lot of us nervous. It makes a lot of us want to shut down. But again, just think it's the candy jar, and we're just grabbing a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And I think about this. So there's times when we think God is love, neat. Like God is love. We're like, well, that's neat. That's nice. Yeah. I would argue that perhaps we honestly don't know. We've not tasted and seen. We haven't really grabbed one of the pieces of candy out of the jar. Or we don't realize, or we've settled on a lesser definition of what love is. Because if we understood and were willing to dive a little deeper, we could not say neutrally, God is love, neat. It would have us at our table groups lean in and be like, yes, God is love. Yes, are you kidding me? He is. And all people would just lean in. I was like, let me tell you how I've seen this play out. I was thinking about this is how God is wired, and we would all lean into these conversations. We'd be like, I can't wait to talk about the fact that God is love because it has changed my life. And yet what happens is you'll have a moment like this. You'll have you'll be thinking about something of who God is, and you'll be like, I got to share. And you'll come in and you'll lean in and say, guys, I got to let you know, because God is such a loving God. And this is what people do around the table. They'll go like, yeah, I thought you were going to say something new. Don't be discouraged. Keep eating pieces of candy and encourage others to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Let us not yawn at who he is or his attributes. Psalm 145, verse 3, the Lord is great and certainly worthy of praise. No one can fathom his greatness. Fathoming his greatness. There is no searching it out. Literally in the Hebrew it is, there is no searching it out. It can't be done. And so as we come into these attributes, we're going to break them into two categories, not because I have done that, but this is how folks have gone about thinking about God and his attributes for a very long time. That the incommunicable attributes, these are the attributes that God has alone. He does not share these with any other. And then you have the communicable attributes. These are the ones that we share in his likeness. And so already, if you're like me, I'm reading that going, wow, that's greedy of him. I want those. The incommunicable ones, that's what I want. You tell me that I can't have those, I'm going to show you that I can. That should reveal something. That attitude and response in my heart right there should tell you something about me and my brokenness and my distortion of thinking that I can be God. Let's look at a few of these things. First thing here is self-existence and self-sufficiency. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God. We'll just leave it right there, in the beginning God. He doesn't have a beginning, we do. This earth does, the universe does. He doesn't. And that's hard for us to fathom. We really cannot fathom that. And it makes us very uncomfortable. But what was before God? Nothing. But I don't have a paradigm for that to work in. I'm uncomfortable with that. So what was before God? And we get frustrated as opposed to stopping and saying, I'm just going to worship the God who has always been. And I'm going to actually celebrate over that my mind can't even fathom that. And that's going to move me to a place of worship as opposed to a place of worry. John 5:26, for just as the Father has life in himself, Jesus is going to talk about that he gives them that authority, that ability to the Son as well. And so God is self-existent, he's self-sufficient. And here's the thing, I don't know if this will amaze you or not, but did you know that God does not depend on anything to exist? Literally, he does not depend upon anything to exist. Think about how other that is from you and me. We're all about, I'm the self-made person, look what I have done. Listen, he does not need water. He does not need food. He does not need oxygen. Literally, he does not need air to breathe. He does not need the earth to dwell upon, nor the universe to hang out in. Like, if you really just begin to think a little bit on that, like, that is so other than you and me. He must be bigger and better than what I ever give him credit for. He is not like me. He is not like you. And I don't say that to be like, because you're bad, evil, wicked people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm like, he is bigger than what we give him credit for. That being self-sufficient is truly amazing. He does not depend upon us. He does not need our worship. He is not less God should we all choose to run away from him. He's not wounded and be like, well, I'm really angry and upset and disappointed and less than. That's not him. He's full and complete. And yet, this full, complete God created. And he created you and he created me. And he didn't just create, right? He actually began to give us hints about who he is because he's a relational God. And that should tell us something really beautiful about this self-sufficient, independent, needing nothing God who decided to go ahead, I'm going to create, not out of desperation, but out of overflow and out of love. And what am I going to create? Oh man, all of these things that we see and that we marvel over. And then I'm going to, above all of that, humanity. And I'm going to look to engage with them in a way that I don't with every other thing. We're going to have a relationship. That's incredible. The one who needs nothing moves towards you. That should take some pressure off of you. He's not, you messed up, and he's like, well, we were close, but our relationship was purely dependent upon your performance. No! We have freedom to simply be because he is self-sufficient. One other thing about God here, we'll just go through a few more here. Immutability, big word. He doesn't change. He's reliable. He's trustworthy. He's consistent. And I think this is really, we shouldn't undersell this one in a world that is constantly changing, with people who are constantly changing, whose thoughts and opinions are constantly changing. What is okay to say and what's not okay to say is constantly changing. To sit there and go like, there is reliability and dependability. I, the Lord, the God, does not change. I do not change in Malachi 3:6. And then in James 1:17, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or the slightest hint of change. Never. And then somebody's going to say, well, what about those times that God changed his mind? And we can get into that, not right now, but I would love to have that conversation. Basically, God does this a couple different times. He goes like this. He says either this is going to happen no matter whatever else happens, like I'm going to come back and I'm going to rule and reign, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop me. Literally, there is nothing you can do to make it happen faster, take longer. There's nothing you can do, and nobody will stop him from returning and making all things right. Nobody. There's no conditions. But there's other times he says, this is what I'm going to do, but it's conditional if things don't change over here. And so we confuse those, and when you begin to go back and look within the context, you'll see several times when God is changing his mind, you're like, did he really change his mind? Like, really? Was it changed? I said we wouldn't go into that, but that's okay. But here's the thing we can also glean from this. If he doesn't change, and when we read all throughout Scripture that God and the proud don't mix well, if they didn't mix well then, it doesn't mix well now. If God was all-knowing back with David and Pharaoh and Peter, he's still all-knowing today. If he was gracious back then, guess what? He's gracious today. If he was just back then, guess what? He's just today. It's never a waste of time to get to know him, know about him and how he operates. It's never a waste because he's consistent. He's not like a teenager's love life. Let me just tell you, I got 2 teenagers now, and it's constantly like, oh, this girl, no, this. I can't keep up. It's like, they change all the time, and not even that, it's also interest. Like, I'm into this, no, I'm into this, I'm into this, I'm into this. That's not God. He's consistent. He is stable. And that is a beautiful and incredible thing. He's also all-knowing, omniscient. Truly, I am God. I have no peer. There is none like me. I am God, and there is none like me, who announces the end from the beginning and reveals beforehand what has not yet occurred. Checkmate. Yeah, I mean, like, that's just like, he knows everything. This is a wonderful quote. Charles Ryrie, in his theology book here, Basic Theology, says this: God knows everything. God knows everything. Things actual and possible without effort and equally well. You're like, okay, whatever. Like, think about that for a second. God knows all the things that have actually happened to you, but all those what-if scenarios and the possibilities of this, he knows all of those without effort. That's not like you. That's not like me. Knows all things. You know, it's true universally. It's also true personally. Let's just read. Let me read Psalm 139, 1 through 4. David here says this. He says, Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I get up. Not only that, you understand. You understand my thought, even if it feels like I'm far away. You scrutinize my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. And even before there's a word on my tongue, behold, Lord, you know it all. We long to be known. Sometimes Aaron and I will be talking to people who are in a relationship, and we sit there and we have to sit there and say, here's the deal. And it's not always women who do this. Sometimes it's the guys, but many times women. And Aaron will go like, here's the deal, lady. She just says, you have this thing that says he should just know. Like, he should just know. Like, no, he shouldn't just know. You need to share. You need to let him know. Give him an invitation into what you're thinking. He shouldn't just know. Except for God actually does. Literally know. And that can either excite you or terrify you. He knows, like, the thoughts that I'm thinking right now, the thoughts that I was thinking earlier. He knows the things that I have done. He knows my history. Yes. Why in the world does he still want to move towards me? Because he's loving to a degree that you cannot understand, that I cannot understand. Not only that, he's happens to be all places at all time. Jeremiah 23, 24. Do you people think that I am some local deity? You guys just think I'm just some like little local thing going on here? No. You don't know that I'm the transcendent God, the Lord asked? Do you really think anyone can hide himself where I cannot see him, the Lord asked? Do you not know that I am everywhere? I'm everywhere. Again, that might freak you out. I took a walk today and I thought, these are things where like, yeah, I get that. But he's like fully present in every space and time. Like, he's not just kind of there, he's fully there. Full presence. So it's not like he's sitting there and like, oh, temptation's happening over there. Okay, I got to keep my eye on that. Got to keep my eye on that. You're doing great. You are doing awesome. Keep up. Oh, hold on. He's not divided ever. Do you know that? You've never been alone. In your greatest success and your worst failure, you've never been alone. He has always been fully present with you. And none like him is a great example. She's talking about her and her husband. They have kids, and then all of a sudden they have these award ceremonies. They have to divide and conquer. And so they'll divide and conquer. And so one will be taking a picture. Here's the kid getting an award, and texting and sending it to the other one so they can both be at two places at once. But the reality is they're not fully present at either of those places. And God is never like that. Do you know God to be that? It doesn't matter if you're in your car. It doesn't matter if you're in your lab. It doesn't matter if you're at home alone, asleep in your bed. It doesn't matter. He is there and he's fully present, fully engaged. And the cool thing is he's there not to be like, He's there to be engaged with, calling you and showing you the way of life. Talked about the last week, right? No temptation has overcome you except for that is common to man. God is faithful. He'll never let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. Right? He always provides a way of escape. He's right there. This is the coolest, one of the coolest things that we have about him, I think. He's also omnipotent, all-powerful. In Daniel chapter 4, verse 35, the context of this is really great. Back it up and read it, because Nebuchadnezzar, he's just had a big time dream a year before about a big tree and gets cut down, and he's like really confused. And Daniel says, I'll interpret the dream for you. The tree is you, and you need to change your ways because you're pretty arrogant and pretty proud. I mean, I just wish it wouldn't be this way. So start making changes so this doesn't have to happen. But he doesn't, and so as you get a little bit further, you read, a year later, Nebuchadnezzar's out, like, look what all I have made through my hands for my honor. And God says, I told you what would happen, and you continue that way. And so all of a sudden, he's removed from the benefits of ruling the entire world. He's made like a beast, eating grass. He's like a cow, just out amongst, rooting around. And when he regains his mind, he says this, he says, God, does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand. Dr. Harrell, who is writing the textbook about the Trinity that is eventually will be released, I've been told, he says this, he says, as sovereign creator of the visible and invisible universes, God is able to do anything he chooses. And he always does so in accord with his plan and his character. He has no competitors. There are no close calls. There's none who could even contend with him. Do you know that to be the God you worship? Or is your God at times nervous that the enemy might come and take territory? That the battle is really raging. There's no hope. You ever read the book of Revelation? You ever read Armageddon, the big battle? Like it's so kind of like, really? That was it? He just speaks. And it's over. We're dealing with a God who is far more powerful than what we could ever even imagine. Do you know that? It's interesting also in the book None Like Him, she makes a really great observation. She says, it's very interesting when you look at the list of incommunicable and communicable attributes of God. Where's the world focused at right now? We're trying so hard to steal those that say these belong to God alone. We can have these Google searches that feels like we can know all things. Right? We have FaceTime. We can be at all places. Virtual reality and in games, in worlds and universes that we can create whatever we want to. Like you just see the bent of our heart to try to take his throne. Yet he stands alone. I'm going to move really quick. We're not going to go through all of these, but when you get to the communicable attributes here, these are things that he allows us to share in. But the thing is, each of these we don't hold with the same degree of ability, skill, power, depth, nothing. For example, he's a creative God, right? And therefore we should be a creative people. And yet no matter what we create, no matter how amazing it may seem, it will be nothing compared to what he has created. Let's look at the size and scope of the universe. Like, well, I've done this virtually. Like, well, what happens when your power goes out? And he did this with nothing. We've done it with something. And so even these things that he shares with us, he invites us into, we don't even compare. But I just want us to look. We're going to look at two things here. It's not just that. Sometimes these attributes, they seem like they're opposing forces and that we can't hold them together without tension. And so I just want to look at two things here really quick. One of them is God is just. For all his ways are just. A God of faithfulness and without injustice, righteous and just is he. Just in case you didn't understand that, Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 4. God is just. He is the perfect patrolman. Meaning this, and really, if you want to be like not freaked out, but you want to have a greater appreciation of who he is, think about what would perfect justice look like. So you're driving, and the speed limit is 35, and you're going 36. The lights start flashing, and you're like, what the heck? I'm a mile an hour over. It's not that big of a deal. And so you change lanes to move over to a safe place and turn into a parking lot, and you wait. And here he comes, knocks on your door, and he says, do you know how fast you were going? You're like, I think I was 35. It's like, you were going 36. I got your ticket for you right here. Did you know as well your brake light is out in the back? Oh, I didn't realize. Really? Like yeah, it's broken. Well, it wasn't broken when I left. I don't know what happened. Like, here's your ticket for your broken light. Oh, and by the way, when you actually changed lanes to turn into the parking lot, you didn't signal. Here's your ticket for that. Oh, and hey, by the way, you made that change within 100 feet of an intersection. That's also illegal. Wait, I didn't even know that. Doesn't matter. Here's your ticket for that. Can I see your insurance, proof of insurance? Well, you know what? I've got it. It's on an app. I can show you that I've paid it. I don't have the paper copy. You don't have that? You don't like a ticket? Here's a ticket for that. And no, you can't take your car because it's not legal to drive because it's not insured. You can't show me that it's insured. So you can, hop in the back of my patrol car and we can get going. Like, he is perfect in that. And then you're like, well, officer, and you reach out like, officer, can you just stop for a moment? He's like, did you just touch me? That's violating the law, because that is violating the law. Here's your ticket, and you're under arrest. You're like, this is crazy. Don't you understand? I mean, I got to get home. I thought I left the iron on. I'm going to burn the whole house down. Doesn't matter. Oh, I just broke up with my girlfriend, and I'm just a little, I'm really sorry. I'm not in my right mind. So you shouldn't have been driving in the vehicle in the first place. Here's another ticket for that. Like, he is perfectly just. There are no exceptions. There is nothing you can do or say that will sit there and have him go like, oh, you're right. None of it. He is perfectly, fully just. And he's guilty, and it's maximum punishment. Do you understand that? He holds the law perfectly and demands perfection. And any infraction of that is maximum punishment. Because he's fully just. But then he's merciful. Like, what the heck? Mercy is not getting what you deserve. And Moses says, hey, I want to see your glory. Show me your face. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to pass by you and I'm going to tell you who I am. The Lord God, compassionate and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in faithfulness and truth. Like, how can he be fully just and be merciful? Like, I don't understand. I truly throw in grace in there. That's getting a good thing that you don't deserve. Mercy is holding back and not getting what you deserve. Forgiveness is the release of a debt. Those are all different things. And he holds them to perfection. And what I see in my mind is tension. And he holds them freely and equally. And it's no big deal. What's confusing to you and me is not to him. One thing before we wrap up, and it should be really abundantly easy for you to figure this out. He's not like you. Not at all. He's not like me. If he were, there'd be no reason to be dumbfounded by him, because I'm not that good of a person to be dumbfounded by, and neither are you. And the God that you can picture and imagine is such a small, errant view of him. We need to go to the source, because the source tells us he is perfectly just. And all of us have said, God, I do what I want to do, don't need you. We're going to go our own way. The Bible calls that sin. And there is a penalty that is with that will not be let go. It has to be enforced. The penalty is death. And yet the merciful, gracious, kind, loving God, that's what he did. He moved, right, with compassion and mercy and love. And sent his one and only son to say, I will pay the price that you and I deserve. And we're like, that's incredible. Can I pay you something? It's not counterfeit. I was just at the bank today. Can I give you something for that? And he's like, no. All I'm asking of you is to say thank you. That's incredible. That really the gospel is confusing and makes no sense to me, because I wouldn't handle it the way that he did. And honestly, neither would you. And yet this perfectly just and perfectly merciful and gracious and kind and loving God came, lived a perfect life, fully rejected, brutally died for you, for me. And yet death didn't contain him. 3 days later, he rose from the grave. And he now stands beside the right. He sits next to the right hand, the throne of God, making intercession for us. He's mine, 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 mine. Because the enemy, the accuser, is saying, look at how unfaithful they're being. Look how disgusting they're being. And he's there like, paid for, paid for, paid for. Paid for. Look, they're not even sold in. Like they don't even think you're that great. Like, why would you keep running after them? Because I love them and they're mine. Like, this is beautiful. The gospel is something that should just blow your mind and should like have you walk out of here just dumbfounded, like giddy with excitement, because you were loved in a way that you cannot fully comprehend, and yet was absolutely necessary. We have an incredible God who is so much bigger than how we want to define him. Can we let him be him? Are you imagining the real God, or are you worshiping a counterfeit God made in your own image? Encourage you, take your view of God back to Scripture. See if it's real, because we're called to guard ourselves from idols. So as we wrap up, we looked at indicators, the impact, the attributes, and we looked at just a few of them. I'll post a thing on there for some more attributes if you want to dig in and dive into those things. That's wonderful, fine, and dandy. Here's what I would encourage you to do. This week and change. Read Psalm 139. All of his attributes are not there, but just read Psalm 139. Maybe read it once by yourself, quietly, silently, in your mind. Maybe then read it out loud. Seems really weird, but read it out loud. Maybe have a Bible app read it to you. Spend some time reading and just basking in Psalm 139 and reflect on how is God portrayed in that psalm? Like, how is he really? And really think about how is he viewed? And does it differ from your view of God? Not our professed one, but our practical one. Is he the God who knows us better than what we could ever imagine? Is he the God who is at all places, at all times, and will never leave, never forsake? Is he the God that we cannot hide from and that like we rejoice and celebrate over that? Is he the God that we sit there and go like, you have fearfully and wonderfully made me? You want to have some fun, do a word study on those in the original language and begin to be blown away that you were made with intentionality. You were made for ownership, for his ownership. He wasn't just like, hey, this is something to give away. He made you. He knit you together beautifully, perfectly. Do you see yourself the way that he sees you? I guarantee us none of us do, because he has such a high view that we have no idea. And I encourage you, as you make your list, share with somebody. Just like, this is our God. Somebody who's down in the dumps and you're sitting there and they're far from God. Like, I just wish somebody would know me. I just wish there was somebody around who would care for me. Can I tell you about my God? Can I tell you about who he is and what he is really like? I can't fully fathom, but here's the things that he said, and here's how I've seen it been true in my life. Can I tell you about him? Because then as we're telling others about him, we're imaging him. He is a God who moves towards others, and we are to be a people who move towards others with a beautiful message of hope. Let's pray. God, thank you. I just thank you. You are beyond our wildest dreams, Lord, beyond our wildest imaginations. You are bigger, better, smarter, stronger, more loving, more just, more merciful, more graceful, more caring than what we could ever imagine. And Lord, you are not a ho-hum God. You are not a God that we can just sit there and go like, oh, that's great. Lord, you blow our minds. Father, would you meet with us in big, powerful ways through Psalm 139? Lord, would you reorient our lives and our view of who you are to be more in line, to not be the counterfeit God who's just simply made in my image? Lord, let us give you space to be who you are. We surrender it all, Lord.